You know, the ancient prophets of Israel, they left behind some of the most powerful writings in human history, but they also left us a giant puzzle. A contradiction so massive it's had people scratching their heads for centuries. Because on one hand, it sounds like they want to tear down religion entirely, but on the other, they seem to be its biggest champions. So what's the real deal?
And wow, is this conflict stark or what? I mean, look at this. On the left, you've got the prophet Isaiah basically saying, what are all these sacrifices to me? It sounds like a complete rejection. But then you turn to the prophet Jeremiah, and he's talking about people bringing offerings and sacrifices right to the temple. So which one is it? They can't both be right, can they?
And this whole contradiction really boils down to one massive question about who these guys actually were. Were they radicals, total rebels fighting against the religious establishment? Or were they insiders, company men, working for the very system they seemed to be tearing apart?
Okay, so let's dig into that first theory, the prophets as rebels. This whole view argues that they were fundamentally against the entire religious system of their time. The temple, the priests, the sacrifices. It's what scholars often just call the cult.
And you can totally see why people land on this theory. I mean, the evidence is pretty overwhelming. You have prophet after prophet delivering these absolutely blistering attacks on the core practices of their own religion. They're going after everything, from sacrifices and festivals all the way to the temple itself. It really sounds like they want a religion with no ritual whatsoever.
And this quote, man, it just perfectly captures the heart of their critique. Isaiah doesn't just say he dislikes the sacrifices. He says, your hands are full of blood. See, their problem wasn't the ritual itself. It was the character of the people doing it. They were calling out hypocrisy on a massive national scale.
Okay, but now let's just flip this whole idea completely on its head and look at a totally different picture. What if the prophets weren't rebels at all? What if they were actually official employees of the very system they were criticizing?
This is what scholars call the cultic functionary theory. The argument is basically that prophets were part of the temple staff, professionals with a specific job to do, just like the priests. It's a pretty wild idea, especially when you think about how harsh their words could be.
Now, the evidence here is, well, it's fascinating, because it's mostly indirect. You see prophets and priests mentioned in the same breath all the time. Jeremiah delivers his most famous sermon right there in the temple courts. And then you have scholars like Sigmund Mauenkel, who argue that some of the psalms sound exactly like something an official cult prophet would deliver during a worship service. It's all circumstantial for sure, but it definitely paints an interesting picture.
So we've got these two totally opposite ideas, prophets as rebels or prophets as company men. And honestly, neither one fits all the facts perfectly. Which, of course, brings us to a third way, a kind of synthesis that finally makes sense of the whole contradiction.
And to get this solution, we need this key term, opus operatum. It's a Latin phrase that means, by the work it is worked. It's the idea that a ritual works automatically just because you did it. Think of it like a religious vending machine. You put in the coin, the ritual, and you automatically get the prize, right? It doesn't matter what you're thinking or feeling, and that is what the prophets were railing against.
And when you see it this way, the distinction becomes crystal clear. The prophets weren't against sacrifice, they were against hypocrisy. They weren't against ritual, they were against meaningless, mechanical ritual. They condemned people who were going through the religious motions while living totally unjust lives. What they were promoting was a sincere heart, living a moral life, and worship that actually meant something.
And if you need one quote to just nail this whole idea down, it's got to be this one from the prophet Hosea. For I desire mercy, not sacrifice. God's priority was never just the external action. The real target was always the person's inner life, their heart, their character, their commitment to doing the right thing. The ritual was supposed to be an expression of that, not a replacement for it.
There's actually a great term for this idea, covenantal unity. It's this belief that true religion needs both parts working together as one. It all starts with the inward disposition, a genuine love for God. But then that love has to be expressed outwardly, through both how you treat people, with justice and kindness, and through meaningful worship. One without the other is just incomplete.
Okay, so we've kind of cracked the code on the prophet's core message, right? It's all about authenticity. It's the heart, not just the action. But as soon as you realize that, it brings up a whole new question. If this message was so important, how did we even get it? The way these books were actually written dramatically changes how we see them, and that brings us to a huge scholarly debate, the Isaiah identity crisis.
So the traditional view is, pretty straightforward. A prophet like Jeremiah would get a message from God, and he dictated to a professional scribe, like his assistant Baruch. In fact, there's this amazing story in Jeremiah chapter 36 where they do exactly that. The king gets a hold of the scroll, cuts it up, and throws it in the fire. So they just write the whole thing all over again. But then, over the last couple hundred years, a totally different approach popped up. It's called the literary critical school, and they basically approach these texts like detectives at a crime scene. Scholars analyze the language, the style, the historical details, and they often come to the conclusion that these books weren't written by just one person, but were put together by multiple authors over a really long time.
And probably the most famous case for this kind of analysis is the book of Isaiah itself. There's a pretty wide consensus among scholars that the second half of the book was actually written by a different, anonymous prophet. And the arguments are really strong. The key ideas are different, the writing style completely changes, and the historical setting suddenly jumps forward 150 years. It even names a future king, Cyrus the Persian, by name. It suggests this message of authenticity wasn't a one-and-done thing, but a living tradition that got reapplied to new generations.
But of course, this is a huge debate. It's not a settled issue. The counter-argument is actually pretty simple but also powerful. Isaiah's ministry lasted for something like 60 years. Couldn't a person's ideas, their focus, even their writing style change a lot over that long of a career? So how you interpret the evidence really changes the whole story.
So look, in the end, whether Isaiah was written by one guy or a whole team of people over the centuries, the core lesson is the same, and it's as powerful as ever. The outward acts of religion, all the rituals and ceremonies, are only meaningful when they're a genuine expression of what's going on inside, an undivided love for God and a real commitment to justice.
And that's what's so powerful. This ancient dilemma, it leaves us with a question that is incredibly modern. In our own age of social media, of digital likes and public posts about what we believe, how do we make sure that our own outward acts are truly connected to an authentic inner life? That's a question the prophets would definitely want us to think about.